on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
Indigenous ways of knowing are like this big umbrella, and then Western science, it's underneath that umbrella.
Is the plant alive? Yes. Therefore, it's an organism. Yes. Therefore, it's an entity. Whoa, hey, getting creepy here. It's like, well, I mean, it is, though. It is a living creature. You can sort of communicate with this.
If all the grocery stores shut down tomorrow, and this happens all over the world, I have no doubts about my abilities to feed and heal myself and my family.
At the very tip top of this capitalism hierarchy, they're like buying all the food production. They're buying all the water, right? The zombie apocalypse is coming.
You've heard, obviously, about genetically modified mosquitoes.
They just released them into the environment without any referendum.
One of the big mistakes the prepper community makes is that they try to be so individualistic instead of it's about community.
Episode 128 of the WildFed podcast, Indigenous Food Systems and the Zombie Apocalypse, with Linda Black Elk, is brought to you by Surthrival. I've been using colostrum daily and promoting it as a powerful nutritional supplement for over 15 years. In fact, I just had a quarter cup in my blended drink this morning. With its ability to fortify your immune system, nourish and rebuild your gut lining, repair injuries, aid in muscle growth and recovery, and so much more, I think it's one of the most sophisticated supplements we can work into our diets. Surthrival is already known as the #1 source for premium colostrum, and now Surthrival's just released 3 new formulas: naturally flavored colostrum in chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. They're lightly sweetened with monk fruit and combined with MCT oils to make them more soluble in water and blended drinks, all while having the same potency of Surthrival's original formula. These flavored colostrum powders are so good, I keep eating them by the spoonful right out of the tub. In fact, the amount I ate the day they first arrived was probably a little over the top, but I had to test them rigorously. I'm guessing I ate 5 cups or more. Eaten like that, they're like a powdered ice cream, but of course, they make great blended drinks too. By the way, these aren't those fake flavors you taste in so many supplement powders. These are flavored with real cacao, vanilla, and strawberry, so they taste great and really clean too. Right now, they and all the colostrum products at surthrival.com are 20% off with the coupon code RESTORE. This is Surthrival's biggest colostrum sale of the year, so don't miss out. Head over to surthrival.com to get yours today. Hey, are you a small business owner in the wild food space or a hobbyist forager looking for a side hustle? Then listen up. This episode's brought to you by foraged.market, a website for buyers and sellers of wild and specialty foods from around the globe. Think Etsy, but for foods with a story. But it gets better. Not only do you get your own product page to promote your goods, they expose you to a constant stream of ideal buyers, foodies, chefs, and restaurants looking for raw ingredients or value-added products just like yours. Go over to foraged.market/wildfed to get started. While you're there, you'll also find a coupon for $10 off your first order of any of the incredible products there from other sellers. Foraged.market. Buy there, sell there, and learn more about their incredible vision and conservation ethic by listening to episode 122 of the WildFed podcast. Foraged.market, the global marketplace for wild and specialty foods. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. My guest today is Linda Black Elk, an ethnobotanist specializing in the traditional foods and medicines of the Great Plains and the director of food sovereignty at United Tribes Technical College in Bismarck, North Dakota. She's also the mother of 3 Lakota boys. There's a lot of overlap in Linda and my philosophies around foraged foods and medicines, particularly in how we see each species as more of a who than a what, since getting to know them is more like getting to know another person than it is like buying an inanimate product. We, of course, discuss food and medicine sovereignty as well as ethnobotany, but our discussion takes a turn towards some other rather interesting topics, like the euphemistic zombie apocalypse. Now, of course, neither she nor I really thinks there's zombies or some forthcoming zombie apocalypse, but it does give us a way to, in the spirit of jest, explore the idea of temporary or long-term social, economical, industrial, technological, or medical system collapses and their implications. Though it's become really cliche in recent years, the meme of the zombie apocalypse, I think, is born out of the collective psychology of a culture that knows its life way isn't sustainable. Its systems have become far too fragile, and its people have gotten a little too far away from the skills they'd need to care for themselves in the absence of a nanny state. Recent events have certainly left many of us realizing we'd be wise to prepare our lives for hardships beyond mere toilet paper shortages. Hopefully that preparedness never pays off, since it would mean challenging times, but just in case, many of us have decided to hedge our bets, investing in small or maybe even big ways in our skill sets and in making ourselves more anti-fragile. In fact, when my wife and I became a couple 7 years ago next month, the first card I ever gave her said, "You're the person I want running next to me in the zombie apocalypse." I hope whoever your friends or partner is, that they are people you'd want running next to you in the zombie apocalypse too. Not because one is forthcoming, but rather because it's a generally good principle to live by. If you couldn't rely on them then, how much can you rely on them now? I really appreciate Linda's playful forthrightness in this conversation and her ability to wade into territory that verges on the taboo. I left our conversation feeling elated, largely from the fun of it, but also from being able to ask a few questions that I haven't really felt comfortable to ask before. So get ready for something a little different today, still on theme, but with a playful edge that's sure to make you smile. Get ready for the zombie thwarting powers of Linda Black Elk. Linda Black Elk, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am really happy you're here. I just want to say first, I went to your Instagram account and I saw that your title there is "You want me on your zombie apocalypse team," and I thought she's awesome. I really like that. That's fantastic. But really,
Thanks.
we connected. It just seemed like your name kept coming up. When we contacted you, we sent you, I think, 3 different podcasts as examples of our show. And you were like, "Oh, I know all these people." So that was really serendipitous. Tell us who you are, where you are, and a little bit about what you do.
Awesome. So I am Linda Black Elk. I'm the Food Sovereignty Coordinator at United Tribes Technical College. And I should say that that's one of, I guess it's probably around 38 or 39 tribal colleges in the United States. And tribal colleges are institutions that serve Indigenous populations, like they're fully accredited colleges and universities. Most of them are on reservations, but United Tribes is actually sort of in this urban center, if you can call Bismarck, North Dakota, an urban center. We serve all the local tribes. I'm the food sovereignty coordinator there. I teach courses in Indigenous food sovereignty, ethnobotany, food preservation, traditional food preservation skills, even cooking with Indigenous foods, things like that. And I'm coming to you from the homelands of the Oceti-Sakowin, who are the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota peoples. And also this is the homeland of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara people. And so I try to honor them in all the work I do. And I am a mom. I have 3 sons, and I have a husband who's an amazing partner. And we spend all of our extra time, foraging and gardening and, preserving food and cooking, all of that fun stuff.
Tell me a little bit about when I meet Indigenous folks who say food sovereignty, I want to, there's something that it means to me, but I want to make sure I understand from that perspective. Could you help me and our listeners understand, what does that mean, big picture? And then also, what does it mean to be a food sovereignty coordinator in your job role?
Okay, that's a great question. So I should first say that I'm not enrolled with any tribe. I'm a descendant, and then my mom is Korean and Mongolian. So I have a really unique perspective on food sovereignty.
Rich background, yeah.
Yeah, and that actually my background's been really important in my own personal journey to food sovereignty, and that basically means that we, the people, control all aspects of food production. So if I'm going to eat a meal, I have a say in the seeds that were used, in where those seeds came from, in who plants those seeds, how they're treated, and who's harvesting the food that I eat. And it's just every aspect of food production, but also food sovereignty, especially when we're speaking of it in terms of Indigenous people and people of color. How am I connected to the food that I'm eating? Is this the food of my ancestors? And if it is, what does that mean for me on an emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental level? Right. So when, like, in my work as a food sovereignty coordinator of largely Indigenous students, I often think about, how is this food feeding my students, not just physically, but how is it also nourishing them spiritually, emotionally, mentally? And that's really what I do, and what food sovereignty means in my own life. I also, I think it's really important that my students gain skills necessary toward being sovereign in their everyday lives, and having a say in what they put in and even on their bodies, because I also believe in just wellness sovereignty, having a say in the medicines that we use, for example. And so I really focus a lot on skills. So as food sovereignty coordinator, I teach my students how to air dry buffalo meat or any other meats, how to smoke meats, how to forage safely, and then, in a good way, in a way that respects our Mother Earth, and then in a way that respects their lands and their ancestors, and then how to bring those foods and medicines back into their homes, how to cook with them, how to preserve them, whether it's through air drying, dehydrating, freezing, canning, whatever. That's everything.
I'm reading a book right now and called Food in the Human Past, and it's looking like anthropologically at what people eat. And it just kind of, you reminded me of what I'm reading there, because a big part of the book is about how food is, there's this nutritional component, this like survival component, macronutrients, micronutrients, and all those things. But then there's this cultural component, and that is arguably as or more important to people. And so that part's really fascinating to me, because somebody might be getting enough of the calories that they need and of the kinds of calories they need to live a good life, but that doesn't mean they're being nourished at the cultural level. And so it sounds like a lot of this is helping people to reconnect culturally, I guess, with food as well, because and it's not like, man, I would almost say it's not like anybody in the country from any background or any, I guess, sort of racial group or anything like that, or of any color, is getting like nourished deeply by a food tradition from the past anymore. It's like we're all kind of in that same situation of trying to figure this out. But it does seem like maybe you could just speak to that a little bit, like how you see that part of food from a cultural perspective and what it means.
Yeah. So that sort of hits on the differences between food security and food sovereignty. So for a long time, we've talked about food security, making sure kids and others have enough calories. And that is important, making sure that people have enough calories. We don't want people to be hungry. The problem is when we only focus on calories, we are often feeding people food that is high in calories, but not high in connection. And so they end up still being hungry, even though they're completely full of calories, completely full of canned soup that is high in sodium, maybe with some white bread on the side. Their stomachs are full, but their souls, their hearts are empty. And so, they're still hungry. They're still looking for something. And often what goes to fill those spaces, that emptiness, is more empty calories from things like
Yeah.
white sugar and other processed foods. So, what Western cultures have now labeled comfort foods, those foods do not really comfort us, especially not on a spiritual level. We have no connection to them. I often, tell my students and even my own children, there's no spirit left in a Twinkie. At one point, that even started out as plants. But they have processed all of the spirit out of that food. And so when we talk about, eating foods that nourish us on a cultural level, that's sort of what we're hitting on.
Wow, I really love what you're saying here. It resonates with so many things that are on my heart all the time. I'm working on a slideshow for a group of 4th to 8th graders. I'm going to give a presentation in a couple weeks, and I'm thinking about what do I want to say to them. And one of the big pieces for me it comes up on this show a lot, is that people often don't know who their food is. And I was watching some videos of yours, and I noticed you also sort of imparted personage to many of the plants that you were talking about. And they are a who, not a what. And I really appreciate that, because the Twinkie is made up of all of these different creatures, ultimately,
right.
like aside from whatever refined chemicals have been put in there, synthesized chemicals, these were all living things, like creatures that you could meet face to face, organisms with these really, really long genetic histories and this natural histories of thriving on this planet. And now they've been refined down to this product. You can't tell what species are even in it at this point. And so I'm thinking a lot about trying, this idea of like, not what do you eat, but who do you eat? And have you had the opportunity to meet those organisms? And I wanted to ask you about that as well, because I noticed that you use similar language, referring, like I said, kind of giving non-human personhood to many of the plants that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at plants as my relatives, as my friends, as my allies. And I think that that's so important, because when we build a relationship with the plant nations, when we build a relationship with these non-human relatives and even ancestors, we start to look at the world in a different way. And so when we're walking outside, one of the most common comments from my students is, wow, before I took your class, I would drive down the road and just look at it all as grass. I mean, we live on the prairie. And then, once you take them out there and you show them how incredibly diverse this place is, they, just have a different view, and you start to take care of it. You start to take care of your relatives, and you are a lot less likely to exploit your relatives. And so when we look at, these plants as our relations, we treat them better. And we start to, also see that they have contributions to make, just like we do. We all have contributions to make, and so do the plant nations. And so, it's really important to me to teach my students in particular, to develop relationships with plants and to speak to them, because they are sentient and they hear us and they speak back to us in whatever way they do. And, how do we build that relationship of trust and reciprocity? It's really important to me, because I've seen my plant relatives exploited for so long, and I see a lot of people getting really into herbal medicines and, really getting into cooking, with all these cooking shows on television and things like that. People have really gotten into food and cooking, but do they have an actual relationship with these beings that they are consuming? It's, in large part, the answer is no. And I'd really like to see that change.
Beautifully said. Years ago, somebody said something to me that really stood out to me. It led me to get really interested in astronomy at one point. We were talking about astrology, and she said, it's interesting today because most people who study astrology don't look up at the stars. They wouldn't even be able to point out the constellations of the zodiac. They look at it on paper. They look at it on websites. So there's a divorcing, of the actual, mechanical part of the art and the relationship to the real thing, and then how people consume it. So similarly, I also have met a lot of people who are really into food or who are really into herbalism, but have only dealt with the body parts, not the
Right.
living creature. And it occurs to me too, like, what you were saying, that there's this way in which we exploit those plants sometimes without knowing them. And then there's also this piece that's like the loneliness that we feel because we're just like stuck around just humans and maybe some dogs and cats, but we don't have relationships with the natural world. So it's kind of, I always liken it to if you move to a new town and everybody you see is just like some person, you're like, those are people. Versus when you're in your hometown, you're like, I know that person, this is that person, this is my mom, this is my uncle. So when we know the plants, when we know the animals around us, it's like we're not alone. So I feel like people are fundamentally really kind of like lonesome without, it's going back to that nourishment. And you brought up reciprocity, and I know that's something that you talk a lot about. Now, I was wondering if you could kind of define reciprocity as you mean it, and talk to us a little bit of what that looks like, because even in the wild food community, I feel really blessed to get to speak to so many people in the wild food community. I don't think that people mean to, myself included, to just take so often and not give back. But I think sometimes we don't even really understand that kind of proper relationship and what reciprocity could look like. So, like, could you tell us what you mean by it, and then what it could look like in a real practical sense?
Sure. Yeah. I believe in having reciprocal relationships with all living beings, obviously, if you're in a human to human relationship and you take without ever giving back, that relationship probably isn't going to be very successful. I actually feel the same is true for relationships with plants. And so I give back on a spiritual level, meaning I pray with the plants, I sing to them, I speak to them and allow them to speak. I'm open to them speaking back to me. But also on a practical level, I always make sure that I don't take too much. I make sure that I ask permission first. I make sure that I am, I put myself as just being a part of the system. I'm not separate from it. I'm certainly not above it. I'm part of the system. And so I think it's my responsibility that if I'm going to, so for instance, if we have the discussion about harvesting ramps, you could probably do an entire episode on harvesting ramps.
Oh, have we? And boy, is that challenging territory to wade into. It seems like that's the hot button plant issue when it comes to this whole idea.
It is. And it's because it's become, almost a fad in a lot of wild food, dishes and cooking shows. And I'm sorry, I'm probably going to offend some people here, but it's not even the best tasting onion out there. It's delicious and it's beautiful.
It is good. It's like, I'm a one leaf kind of guy. And those leaves are damn good. But we don't have a lot of wild onions.
They are delicious.
They are good. Yeah. It's become like a cash crop too, which is, brings a whole component to it.
It does. Yeah. I don't know. I always feel a little weird about that. But, one way that, and we do harvest, some ramps, we make sure that we preserve them with respect and that we are also one leafers. Although if we do, my husband, especially as an Indigenous person, member of the Cheyenne River Nation, he feels that taking a few bulbs out of really thick patches will help to sort of thin out an area and allow for them what's left to grow even in an even healthier way. And I tend to agree with him. And so every once in a while, we'll take a few just really special ones, bulbs as well. But when we do that, no matter what we're doing, even if we have a day where we only take one leaf from a small patch of ramps, we actually try to collect seed at the same time and we spread seed. We also, obviously we never take the entire bulb. and we make sure that we cut it at the proper point so that, those roots will send more greenery back up hopefully next year. We're still looking at the data on that, actually, because we love to do little bits of research like that. We have in the past, from really, really thick patches of ramps where they cover large areas, we have transplanted some to areas that we know elders have told us, yeah, we used to have tons of ramps here and now they're all gone. We will actually transplant some into those areas to broaden their range a bit. And, things like that, not just with ramps. That's just one example. But we try to do that with all of our plant relatives. It's just our sort of giving back, our way of making sure that they are being taken care of.
Rumor has it Sam Thayer's putting a documentary out on this topic. I guess he's been doing some pretty rigorous work over the years, testing out different patches of his, which he's cordoned off, and he's doing some science on this topic to really look at like what happens when you take a bulb, what happens when you take multiple bulbs. And I my impression from talking to him and some of his friends is he's arrived at similar conclusions as your husband. And obviously to tell people that's a little scary though, right? It's like, I trust myself to do that. I don't know if I want to tell people that, but yeah, this has gotten a little bit challenging. I want to touch on something else you said too. And I don't like to wade into any identity politics stuff, but I just feel like I need to say this because I keep observing it. You brought up praying with plants, and there's this phenomenon that I've noticed where, like, as a white guy, if I say that, kind of people are going to look at me like, come on, dude. And then if somebody's a tribal member or if they're descended from indigenous folks and they say that, then it's like, oh, well, then people respect it. And I'm like, oh, this is really a weird, like, oh, well, they have a connection to spirit that we don't. It's just like maybe historically we didn't demonstrate it all the time, but like that.
Or you're further removed from it, maybe, right? But that doesn't mean we can't all regain that connection and that it's not vital that we do so. I feel like it's super important that we do that, and that even white guys do that. I think it's going to change, once you do that, especially if you hear back from, these non-human living beings in some way, it's going to change your life and change your perspective on things. Why, since when has praying become this like mystical thing, like it's praying.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the component of communicating again with like non-human, because it's like one thing if you're monotheistic and you pray to your Godhead, okay, that's like acceptable. But if you're in communication with non-human entities, then people get, that are right in front of you. It's like, because I'll be like, hey, you're standing right here in front of this plant. Is the plant alive? Yes. Therefore, it's an organism. Yes. Therefore, it's an entity. People get like, whoa, hey, getting creepy here. It's like, well, I mean, it is an entity. It's like a living creature. You can sort of communicate with it. It seems very natural and normal to me, but for whatever reason, I think like culture wide here in the United States, my opinion is that just like we've seen over the course of decades and centuries, as the science accumulates, these more subtle, difficult to understand things that seem metaphysical will become more understandable through, I guess, the kind of science that we're used to doing. And then eventually, once we accept it, then we'll be like, oh yeah, then all the articles will start coming out. Pray to your plants,
Right? Oh, well, isn't it weird that we live in a world where, and I have a relationship with the Creator. Like I don't have a problem with that. But isn't it weird that we think it's okay and more normal to pray for this like white guy in the sky, because I think how some people look at God or whatever, that
I've seen the pictures. He's clearly a white guy.
Right? The long hair. He kind of looks hipster.
Even his hair is white. We're talking that one. Oh, okay. That one's funny because dudes will straight up be like, Daniel, your hair's getting a little long. I'll be like, you're a Christian. Jesus has like hair down to his side.
Come on.
What are you talking about?
But isn't it weird that we think it's normal to talk to and pray to this guy, or what people perceive as a guy, But we think it's weird to talk to this living being right in front of us that is clearly, able to grow and signal, and Mimosa pudica. I mean, come on, it moves.
Wow,
through
thank
touch.
you for bringing that up. Yeah, that's a plant where when you touch it, all its leaves draw into each other, right? It's like so responsive, like as if it has like a nervous system.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, season 2 of our TV show WildFed is now on the air. That's right, 10 new episodes are airing on Outdoor Channel Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and again at 10:30 p.m. This week, we're in Maine for some late autumn beaver trapping with Randy Huntley, who you may remember from a past episode of this podcast. Then we're out on a frozen marsh harvesting our native rose hips in the snow. We'll bring all our ingredients back to wild game cookbook writer Kate Kurlansky, another former guest of this show and the author of 50 Ways to Eat a Beaver, for an unforgettable meal. Next week's episode centers around Savannah, Georgia, where I'll be spending a week with my good friend Chef Tony Seachrist for some near and offshore fishing, crabbing, and hog hunting. Tony is an incredible forward-thinking chef, and he knows his way around wild ingredients. After all, his dockside restaurant is called The Wild. Hey, if you don't have cable, and let's face it, most of us don't, you can watch the show live as it airs on friendlytv.com. That's spelled friendly without vowels, FRNDLY TV.com. You can get a free trial subscription if you want to watch this Monday's episode, and after that, it's just $6.99 a month. Here at WildFed, we're so proud to have our second season on the air, and we really hope you'll tune in either on Outdoor Channel or friendlytv.com. Now, back to the show.
It is so amazing. And Dakotas call that shy plant in the Dakota language. So
it's out there?
They say it's shy.
I've only seen it in South America.
Oh, no. Yeah. South Dakota.
I didn't realize
everywhere.
That. Oh,
yeah. Beautiful.
Cool. Oh, glad to find that out. Oh, that's really interesting. Something that I heard you talking about was you were talking about growing up learning plants from your grandmother, and then later on through your education realizing that like she was a scientist. And yes. I wanted to ask you to speak to that because I think like that's kind of what I'm saying is like so much indigenous wisdom is being validated now, and it's like, oh man, like forehead slap, talk about it a little too late, but like, it's also great to see like as people become aware that, especially I think this more than anywhere I've seen this is in the ethnobotany, right? Especially when you see it like where ethnobotanists are realizing, oh, this group has 16 divisions, subspeciations of this plant that we don't even understand yet how they're categorizing those. Like they have more a finer tooth comb than we yet do in botany, of course, because of the deep, close relationships. But I feel like that's something that we're still a little slow to understand, is that this was science. And I heard you say it, and I was like really lit up by it.
Yeah, I feel in this, I've offended people by saying this, but I feel that indigenous knowledge, indigenous ways of knowing are like this big umbrella of knowledge. And then Western science is sort of a subset, right? It's underneath that umbrella. And it's because Western science, Western ways of knowing and understanding the world oftentimes do not respect emotion, dreams, visions, feelings, things like that. And I think that we are, they don't respect connection. And I think that by not accounting for those things in knowledge accumulation, they're missing out on so much. And so, I feel like when I talk to elders, I'm talking to some of the most knowledgeable scientists in the world. And I truly believe that. And obviously they wouldn't call themselves scientists, but they know and understand how, interconnectedness, they understand, there's a plant, Monarda fistulosa. In English, it's called horse mint or bee balm. Some people call it wild bergamot. Amazing plant, amazing, for food, amazing for medicine. And, it's interesting because the Lakota people have long recognized two different, I guess you could call them subspecies, right? And Western science doesn't see that at all, does not recognize those subspecies of Monarda fistulosa on the prairie. And, it's crazy because as a botanist, as a plant person who's out there, you can very, very clearly see that some of these Monarda fistulosa plants grow as singular organisms, singular plants, whereas others grow in clumps, like a bunch grass almost. And, they're very obviously two different, there's two different things going on here that the Lakota have recognized for a very long time. Western science does not see it. It's the blinders or something of logic. Logic can sometimes really blind people to what's happening and what's really out there. So I think about that all the time. My mom too. She grew up having to rely on plants for food and medicine because she grew up in extreme poverty, and the scientific knowledge, the knowledge and understanding of the world that she gained from that is just astounding to me. Sometimes I'll talk about a plant and then she'll say, well, describe it to me, and I'll describe it. And she'll say, oh yeah, that's such and such. And she just, from these descriptions of the leaves and flowers, she'll know exactly the plant I'm talking about and how it's used and the type of habitat it grows in. And yeah, it's absolutely amazing to talk to people that have that relationship with the landscape.
Where are we at right now? I guess it's 2022 Gregorian time, and we are where, I guess so my question is like, where are we at with how much of that cultural knowledge remains, and how interested are young folks in it, and where do you see yourself sort of in space-time in relationship to all of this, knowing what happened in the past, knowing what needs to happen in the future? Yeah, like, does that make sense? Like, can you help us like kind of identify like what's the situation right now? Because it seems like, and I know especially out where you are right now, our mutual friend Travis told me that when COVID came through there on the res, like a lot of Lakota language speakers and Dakota language speakers were lost. So a lot's happened. How much of this knowledge do you think is there? And is there a significant number of young people who want to step into learning this knowledge and carrying it forward?
So I can speak to that only from my own personal perspective as a mother to Indigenous children and as a teacher at a tribal college. And so I just wanted to make that perspective really clear.
That's a pretty good position from which I think you're sort of an expert on the topic.
Well, it's, gosh, this is a really tough question because I might get emotional. So let's talk about that first. So have you seen the new IPCC report? Have you gone through that yet?
No.
Oh the
tell us what that is and what's in it.
Oh, so the climate change report, it is dismal, right? I mean, if you read the new climate change report, it is I think it's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it is really scary and sad. And they even put I'll just tell you, they gave us 8 years before we are at the point of no return, to completely change what we're doing and all of that stuff. And it was so difficult to start reading because I am an optimist when it comes to this. I get to see my students absolutely head over heels in love with their culture and their ancestors. And like, oh my gosh, we were tapping trees the other day, tapping box elder maples for sap so that we can boil it down into syrup. And to see a 25-year-old person just go, oh my gosh, when they see the sap start to flow, like that's the stuff that maple syrup is made from, and making those connections and knowing that I took a group of 5th and 6th graders out to tap those box elder maples with them. And one of the 5th graders drank a small cup of the sap. And he looked at me and he said, "It's weird, but I can feel that in my whole body."
Yeah.
He could feel it flow through him. And I said that your DNA recognizes that food, that drink that you have right now, and like on a spiritual level, you could just tell that they were all connecting with it. And that's the 5th and 6th graders. That's the college students that I work with, and they connect with these plants. And it's absolutely, in a mainstream university classroom, I have to convince students that plants have spirit and that plants are living sentient beings. In a tribal college classroom, it is already, even for students who have long been removed from their culture and may not have ever even been to one of their ceremonies or may have never eaten any of their traditional foods growing up, it is a given to them, absolutely, that plants are sentient, communicative beings, and that that they're descended from buffalo and things like that. These things are given to them, and it's so beautiful to watch. And they are determined. I have a student, for example, who's absolutely determined that her goal in her life, above and beyond any career, is to be able to feed herself and her family someday, to have the skills to say, I don't have to go to a grocery store. I know how to feed my family and to feed them well with food that's going to nourish them spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So it's beautiful. And I get to see that every day. I get to see my 6-year-old, soon to be 7-year-old. If I give him a bowl and tell him to go outside to get salad, he can harvest all of those plants and know exactly what they are, and even tell you about their, medicinal properties and things like that. And, I get to see that every day. And so I think I'm a lot more optimistic than a lot of people are, but wow, I have deep and happy hopes for the future because I get to see these beautiful young people reconnecting and connecting every day. It's cool.
First, that is cool. So thank you for that. And it's a little confusing to me to try to interpret everything that I see happening in the world, because on one hand, I also get to see, just in my own work, a lot of young people getting very excited about this, and sort of the natural, the pendulum swings, so we get so far away from food that we don't even know what food is anymore. And then, you end up with a generation that becomes interested in these things again, or, you let the pharmaceutical world hijack medicine long enough, there's going to be sort of that resistance to it. And you got young people interested in learning about real remedies and about herbal medicine and things like that. At the same time, you have folks like Bill Gates are like buying as much farmland as they can, and obviously these folks are responding to the climate change narratives. You're seeing it. It's like, okay, if that's real, I have a hard time believing anybody really knows if that's real, but like, that's what the modeling says. That's what the projections are. So what do you do? Like, you just said 8 years. It's like, okay, well, the zombie apocalypse is coming. So if so, how do you respond? Well, if you look at how folks are responding, at the very tip top of this hierarchy, of this capitalism hierarchy, they're like buying all the food production. They're buying all the water, right?
They're going to be buying all the water and all the food production. They're going to be making sure that they have ways to clean their own air and to have drinkable water and to have soil that can actually grow things. It's the problem is we have psychopaths in charge of everything, and that's how they got in charge, because they run over everyone else and put themselves in those positions with money, because we live in a capitalist society. But
in fairness, that happens if you look around the world in the places that are, like, let's say as a contrast, or socialist or really communist, you get the same. I just want to say that for fairness, because you end up with a Putin too, or you end
It's
up with
everywhere.
Kim Jong-un. It's like, if there's a
Mhm.
way to get to the top, because I mean, is that not what's beautiful about the way Indigenous people have structured their societies, is where that can't happen? But anyway, sorry, I digress. Us carry on. I'm
No,
agreeing with you.
that's super relevant. I think that that's incredibly relevant and very, very true. Psychopaths in charge everywhere. um, but yeah, no, I think sometimes Indigenous societies and governance can get romanticized, but there are multiple. It is a round structure in which there's not one person who gets to make all of those decisions, right? Not even one gender gets to make all of those decisions, and that has a real impact on the way that people live and the way that they eat and the way that they, treat each other, even people that they may not always get along with. And yeah, it's wild to watch, but the only thing that we can do and the only thing that's going to make a difference is for us to just keep moving forward and reconnecting and doing what we're doing, because I have a firm belief that if we look at huge societies historically, they fall, and those
Kind of
psychopaths in
all of them.
charge, all of them, right? And that's probably where we're heading. I think it's important to remember. My friend Winona LaDuke, she often talks about the death throes of the fossil fuels industry and how they are trying to, they're like psychotic in their just grab for whatever little tiny bit of fossil fuels they can find, right? They'll do anything to get to those. And it's because we are in the time of the death throes of the fossil fuels industry. And, so they're desperate. And I think it's the same thing with, all of these wealthy people buying up land, buying up, food production. Well, can we really call that food production? I'm not quite sure anymore if we can even call that, what's happening there, food production. It's some commodity, but I don't know that we'd call it food when we have people growing, like, for example, we have people growing potatoes who won't eat their own potatoes because they're so, what they perceive as toxic. But, so I think it's the same thing. We are seeing a desperate pull for land and water and resources because they want to maintain their position, and they see their position falling. It's going to happen, and they're going to keep trying to hold on to it. So
it's hard because I'm 43 right now, and when I was a kid, I was kind of a revolutionary, kind of a radical, and I'm a lot less radical now, because now I've built a life around myself that I really like, and I don't want it to like change too dramatically, I start to feel like, so when I watch young radicals now, I'm like, hey buddy, you're like, that's going to affect my lifestyle. And it makes me understand, like, because, another perspective too, is like that these oil companies are made up of a lot of individuals who don't want their lifestyle to change. Right. It's like,
of course.
And so they're all, it's like, it starts to take on like one, it's like becomes one monstrous entity, but it's just made of all of these like little individuals, or like cells in it. And they just all want like their homeostasis or improvement, but jointly they become this like demonic force that just gobbles up the world, and I also I want to just go back to what you said. I mean, it's noteworthy like that there are none of these ancient civilizations around anymore because they all go through collapses that really seem to mirror the kind of things we're experiencing right now. It is. So do you think there's this is like a question I've been wanting to ask a while. And I know you may not be able to answer it, but is there a sense like let's say on the reservation, is there a sense like we'll just wait them out? They're going to destroy themselves? Or is there a sense of like, you know what I mean? Because, you probably do know what I mean. Is there a sense like, if we wait long enough, they can't sustain this and we can, rebuild our life way? Because I don't get a sense from Indigenous folks that I've got to communicate with. I don't get a sense of like, oh, we're really looking to fully integrate. It seems like we really want to get our life back, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting. So like, is that something you feel comfortable to speak to? Because it's like everybody, like Bill Gates's response to all this stuff is, I'll buy farmland. I want to be, like I want to be the Lord in this new serfdom or whatever. And then, there's all of us like all doing our own thing too. So like, what's the sort of sentiment amongst the people you're around?
So I can speak to that from the perspective of a wife with a husband who is totally waiting it out. and absolutely believes that, so something that he said recently that kind of made me giggle is, don't worry, honey, Bill Gates is going to be one of the first to get eaten in the zombie apocalypse. And, I get what he's saying. And yeah, so I think that exists, that idea exists among a lot of people. They may not say it out loud or talk about it, but, I know people who feel that way, that are just kind of, it's going to happen eventually. And, did you see the movie? Oh, what was that called? Blood Quantum. Did you happen to see that?
No, this is an issue that I only recently became even aware of. Please.
Well,
explain.
Actually, it's not what you think.
Oh, okay.
It is a zombie movie.
Oh, sign me up.
A zombie movie about Indigenous people who are not infected by the zombie virus. only you're right. And so they walls are built up around reservations to keep all of the white zombies out. And it's a fantastic movie. I highly recommend it. Right. No, that's a good question. Which I think is kind of addressed in the movie a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. So if you get a chance, you have to check it out. But I think like my husband, for example, kind of feels that way, kind of feels like, okay, we have been preparing for these things. And COVID was a real wake up call for Indigenous communities saying, oh my gosh, it's imperative that we get back to traditional diets, because obviously, processed foods and these, Western foods have impacted us, and we are now predisposed to diabetes and heart disease and obesity. And that makes us, of course, like first in line for pandemic viruses. And so we have to do something about that. And I see that. I see Indigenous communities now preparing, because we firmly believe, I would say, and I can say we, because I hear this from everyone that I talk to. This COVID is not even over, but it's not the last pandemic virus we're going to see in our lifetimes, no matter how those pandemic viruses are released. This is not the last one we're going to see even in our lifetimes. And so we have to prepare ourselves. And because we have still are very close to the land and have that relationship with the landscape and have that relationship with those relationships with plants and, our non-human animals and things like that, we will be much better off. And so we just need to kind of wait it out. That's a perspective of a lot of friends of mine, including my husband. So
I'm just taking it in. I'm stunned, and I love it. I thank you for being forthright with that one. You could have dodged that one. I'm reading a book right now, Eating to Extinction by Don Saladino, and he's talking about in one place. And this is something I've had a hard time. I'm not sure where his data comes from. It's something I've had a hard time getting or like nailing down. And of course, with the number of different cultures around the world, this would be hard to do. But kind of looking at like how many foods are we eating, and then how many foods did traditional peoples eat around the world, typically on average. And he was saying that the Hadza eat something like 800 species.
Yes.
and then we're eating something like 30. And most people, I often tease people and I'll be like, have you ever seen an asparagus when it grows out? because you've been eating it your whole life. Have you ever seen a haddock or a cod? Because you've been eating it your whole life. Do you even know what the thing looks like when it's alive? And most of us don't. So let's say that on average, in a year for hunting and gathering peoples, they might eat. I mean, 200 species is probably conservative to say. That you would know and eat or use as medicine, a couple hundred species. And so, that's an interesting thing too, because I sometimes look at the like prepper community or the survivalist community. They're like, I'll just put away enough food, get through 20 years in my bunker. It's like, you're dead in like 6 months of vitamin C deficiency, dummy. Like, that's not going to work.
All that ketchup and salad dressing.
Yeah. I just keep adding water to these freeze-dried meals. It's like after 3 days, you won't be able to go to the bathroom though.
Oh, God.
So, or the idea that you'll just learn that stuff on the fly. I mean, after, a decade of doing this stuff, it's like what you keep learning is how much you don't know. And then it's not just knowing what you can eat. It's like, when can you eat it? What part of it can you eat? And how do you process it into food? And that, like, so that, as you say, kind of like waiting it out, it's like with all of this knowledge of, and all these relationships with so many different species. I mean, that spreads out into a very wide network that makes somebody really anti-fragile versus being like, I have a bunch of food in the basement. It's like, well, that can get taken. That can go bad. The mice can eat it. That's a really fragile position. Maybe it's stronger than I just have 3 days worth of food in my house, but it's not knowing all of these different species. So I think that's a big part too, is just going back, because there's the really beautiful spiritual component that we've been talking about, relationships to all these species. And then there's the piece that relates to, on a global level, like you brought up pandemic. Of course, we're looking at a lot of like crazy socioeconomic things, and then, war now and all of these kind of things. And it's like, you want to take, probably if you're watching like the billionaires buy up all the food production, you probably want to take a fairly strong stance. It's like a game of, it's a game called musical chairs. It's like, hey, if the music's been playing for a while, you probably want to start looking for a chair. And I just feel like what you were talking about before, when people start to meet all these different species and then learn how to work with them, it's like that part of your brain that worries about this stuff somewhere in the back of your head gets to kind of go quiet. And you're like, okay, I like have a plan. Like,
yes. I have friends who are super scared about what's going to happen. And, my husband and I and our family and even like a group of friends that we call our zombie apocalypse like team, our allies. I think we live our day-to-day lives really with a sense of security, right? That's food insecurity, right? Not knowing. Like I have no doubt that if all the grocery stores, I ask my students this question all the time. If all the grocery stores shut down tomorrow, and this happens all over the world, right? Coups, takeovers, whatever, wars. One day kids
superpower invades your small country.
Exactly. One day kids are on their iPhones, talking to their friends in other countries over Facebook, eating Pop-Tarts and things like that. And the next day, all the grocery stores and all the clinics are shut down. And if you want to try to bribe someone for a gallon of milk, it's $135. These things happen all over the world. And, I do not worry about that at all. I have no doubts about my abilities to feed and heal myself and my family. And that is an incredible feeling. And I don't worry about, stocking up on ammunition and stocking up on guns and who's going to have the bigger one. I don't even play that game in my head because I know that I have skills, and that makes my life really secure. I wanted to tell you, I would love to keep talking about that, but I wanted to tell you a quick story because you've hit on something that reminds me of it, numerous times in our conversation. And I just had to tell you real quick that I worked with a gentleman who had specialized in sweet potatoes for 45 years. And he was retiring, right? He was like the sweet potato guru, and he was retiring, and I really wanted to make him a special gift. So I went and collected clay from the riverbank, and I took beautiful sweet potato leaves and flowers, and I pressed them into the clay, and I made this really cool sort of wall hanging, that I fired in a kiln and, painted and everything. It was beautiful. And I went and I gave that to him in his office, and he was like, wow, that's like stunningly beautiful and things like that. And later that day he called me and he said, what plant is this? He said, my wife is asking what plant this is.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, he had been working with sweet potatoes on a genetic level for his 45 years, right? A lifetime, and had never really seen
that he would know what it was.
He'd never seen a sweet potato plant probably in his life, practically, because he worked at things on such a micro level. So it just reminded me of what you were saying about, relationship and, knowing our plant relatives, really knowing them. It's totally different, but yeah.
And it's also a bit like, okay, so here we all are living in this culture. I mean, after all we've just said, I mean, I live in a place where we lose power routinely because of, snow. And I'm amazed, even with the skill set that I have, even with all the things that I do, like when the power goes out, I'll be kind of at a loss for a little bit. I slip into a rhythm after a while, but it's like, I'm still trying to flick on light switches or whatever. And, I still want to like look things up on the internet, which is out and all of that. And so I'll catch myself and I'll realize like how habituated I am. And, having grown up in this culture the way I did, and having grown up eating all those Twinkies we were talking about before and living on those empty calories, to try to learn this stuff as an adult, it's like, I will never be able to get to the place of knowledge that somebody would have been at as their natural baseline just a couple hundred years ago. I meet someone like Sam Thayer where I'm like, how do you know all of this? Like, it just can't even understand how he knows what he knows. But so, none of us can like really become that super adapted person. It's like we each have to carry a piece, I guess. And I often, I guess I'm curious, like how you see that part of it too, because you can only learn as much as you can learn and still manage because ultimately as an organism, your directive is like, you have to thrive in your environment, right? You have to stay fit to thrive in your environment. So your environment is like mine, I'm sure, mostly the built environment and mostly the technological environment. And then we spend as much time as we can out in the natural environment. So we're trying to adapt ourselves to that, but we are also, we have to stay adapted to the built and urban environment if we want to continue to, thrive in the world. So like, how do you see that balance? And especially with kids, I mean, even if you get them started as early as possible, there's like limits on how much time they're going to really have for all of this stuff. So when it comes to trying to regain as much of this knowledge as possible, how do you, that sense of overwhelm, like you go into a big bookstore and you're like, oh my God, I want to read every book. And it's like, I'll get this like brain freeze. Like, what do I do? Like with the natural world and all that, this, traditional knowledge, how do you face down how much of it there is?
So that is where community comes into play, and building community, making sure that we can rely on each other, having people that you can trust, because I think that one of the big mistakes the prepper community, if we can call it that, makes is that they try to be so individualistic, right? And that's, I think, a big problem that Indigenous people have had with Western society, Western culture from the beginning, is that it's all about the individual. Who's going to be in first place? Who's going to win, right? The one person, instead of building a sense of community.
Which one of y'all is the chief anyway?
Oh my God, right? I don't have to know everything. I don't. And I'm not even trying to. I am trying to know what I can and learn what I can and take care of myself and my family. But I am not good with snaring and trapping. That is not a strong suit. I am very good with plants, and specifically with medicinal plants. And, my husband is very good with making a bow drill and a fire. And we have friends who are like amazing hunters and, bow makers. It's about community. And, I don't have to know all of that. I don't even feel pressed to know all of that, because I think that it would diminish the skills that I have attained to try to know all of this. And that is extremely overwhelming. It's so that's where community and family become super important, and, building those relationships with people too.
That's really beautiful that you said it like that. I think too, sometimes I'll meet people who have like so many tremendous skills, but then they don't have good interpersonal skills, or they're not good at communicating those skills. So it's like, there's all this like earth-based knowledge that we need, but we also need all of this social knowledge, and we need financial knowledge, and we need, there's just like all these things we need to know. So you kind of want, I mean, for me, I'm always thinking like, I want to be good at all those baseline things that, like I said before, to thrive in the actual world that I live in. Cause I think that it's easy to fall into an imaginary world of almost, we end up like LARPing a little bit, where it's like imagining that we're in some other era. And that's like really fun to do, but it's like, hey, at the end of the day, like if I'm not thriving in my personal life, then, that needs work too, or else it's going to undermine my LARPing time.
Right. I mean? Well, I see, like if we watch any of those like survival shows or whatever, a friend of mine was talking about some survival show that, she lives up, she's Alaskan Native, and she was talking about some survival show, and she happened to sort of stumble upon their, I guess, training or encampment. And she was like, they were giving them hides, and they were giving them, all of these tools. And she was like, so they basically gave them a vacation. And I had to tell her, that's not a vacation for them, because those people are going to be extremely uncomfortable out there, because they don't have the skills of living there that you have. And they don't understand, and actually being able to be uncomfortable is a skill in and of itself. Yes, it's like you were saying, like we have this level of comfort that we do not want to see disrupted. Being cold is a terrible thing for me. Like my biggest issue is insects, like, like bugs getting bitten, like crazy is, I don't want that. Like, I don't like that. And I don't want that. And I will do all kinds of things to avoid that. There are things about the Lakota way of life that are very uncomfortable. There are a lot of things within the culture where you don't eat for a period of time. You don't drink water for a period of time. You are exposed to the elements for a period of time. And it's still a really important part of the culture. And we talk about how, my husband will say that, back in the day, this would have been so much easier for his ancestors because they were used to being uncomfortable. They didn't have, they weren't Netflix and chilling, and with, heat and air conditioning and all of that stuff. And so being able to be uncomfortable, being willing to be uncomfortable is a big deal. And, it's I think something that we all kind of need to practice, to be honest, because I think there, even there are some places in the world, for example, where rolling blackouts are a daily thing, right? And I can see that coming on the horizon. So
yeah, I would agree with you on that. Instability in the grid. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we are so. I mean, the level of comfort is so almost like. That's one of those signs, though. That's one of those things that happens, like when a society gets really unstable. You reach these points of opulence, and we become so. Because now we're Chihuahuas, right? We're instead of wolves, and you don't have to go that far back in time to. I'm constantly reading accounts of things people did that you're like, how could they have tolerated that? And like you said, with insects, this is one people ask me about all the time. Like, how do people deal with insects? It's like. I mean, I know there's plants you can use and there's fats you could rub on yourself and clay and things, but it's like, and smoke and all of those things. But like, that must have sucked sometimes really bad. But I bet that, you were just hardened to it, and
Right.
I am not.
No. And I had kind of have a philosophy that just a hypothesis that there were not as many when the human population was lower. There weren't as many insects, and like, I don't know if that's true, but so for example, the Lakota would air dry meat just out on the prairie, hang it to dry, without any smoke or anything like that. No smoked meat. It was just completely air dried meat. And, the number one question we get when we air dry meat now is, how do you keep the flies off of it? And, like these days we do use like sort of like a mosquito net tent thing. And we put the drying racks inside of it because the flies are just horrendous around here. And I think it's because if we talk to elders, it was never that big of an issue back in the day. And I think it's because of the cattle industry here.
That actually,
the ranching industry.
That makes sense. I live in a place now where we have the most, it's like it's a horrifying level of ticks. And when I grew up in this place, never saw a tick until I was an adult. I mean, they just weren't here. And now if you walk through my backyard, like doing the tests they do for research studies, like you drag a white sheet so you can see how many ticks you end up with per square foot or whatever. I mean, the average person would not come to Maine if they knew. So, but it didn't used to be like that. So sometimes I feel like it's like a Pandora's box thing. Like the more we meddle with the integrity of these old ecosystems, the more we release a lot of these kind of horrifying, gross kind of critters that come out to recycle the world,
Oh my gosh, dude, we should sometime have a conversation about, you've heard obviously about genetically modified mosquitoes.
They just released them into the environment,
yes,
didn't they? Just without no referendum, no conversation. Like we're just going to put them out
gosh. Oh, it's infuriating. I suppose if I'm scared of anything, it's that. And I believe that, okay, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I believe that they tried to genetically modify ticks as well. And now there are more virulent strains of Lyme disease because of it. I believe it.
I'm not going to dispute it. I'm not going to dispute that. Yeah, I'm wondering about, I'm at home this morning. I'm playing with this little device called a Muse. It's Muse, and it's a EEG that I can put on my forehead. It was like $200, and I can read my brain waves. It's like that's technology that used to cost. That was tremendously expensive, and now it's like a consumer good. And I say that to illustrate when these kind of CRISPR technologies start to become. When the average person could have like an in-home 3D printer and a CRISPR, and they could, print out organisms that they modify at home, like we're kind of, if we don't have one of those collapse scenarios we're talking about, and you imagine like you plot the trajectory of where we're headed and that technology becomes more and more accessible because like think of the potential bioterrorism of a person being able to just create and release things. And then you go like, well, they already did that. They're doing that all the time. And I'm shocked by that. I'm shocked there was no national discussion about putting those mosquitoes out. I think they did that in Florida, right?
Yeah, they did. I think that goes kind of back to what I was saying about my husband, like how we're all just kind of waiting it out and buying our time. That stuff is happening, and gosh, it's just wild to me. I think sometimes I'll be driving down the road and I look around and I'm like, wow, is this really what the creator had in mind? All of these tiny devices for all sorts of things, right in the palm of our hand. And, the fact that we are expending so many calories to make products that don't give us the same level of, the same amount of calories. They don't even provide the same amount of calories that it took to produce. And wow, it's wild. I wrote an article once on cereal and just the amount of calories it takes to produce the box that the cereal comes in and the dyes that are used in the cardboard that's used to make it. It's just absolutely insane and, wild to me. But I see it all changing too, in good and bad ways. So
Yeah, I agree. And then there's also, I guess, kind of as we conclude, it's like you got to just get up every day and do stuff, and you got to stay motivated, and you got to stay in the light, right? So it's like, chop wood, carry water is what I always say. Because this stuff, I mean, I'm sure you get a sense from me, and I get a sense from you. We could probably if we weren't worried about freaking out the audience, we could escalate this all day long and get to some pretty weird, far out places with it. But at the end of the day, it's like I got to get up tomorrow, and I got to like contribute goodness to the world, in some meaningful way. And I got to make sure I take care of my needs and my family's needs and all those kind of things. And so I guess I kind of want to go there to kind of wrap us up, is like, with all of this said, like, what's it look like to you to still contribute and to still, I understand the work you're doing, so I don't mean how do you contribute, but like, how do you like find the love and the passion that I feel from you and the care that I feel coming out of you, in a world kind of gone mad like this?
I make sure that I get outside every day, no matter how cold it is. And, it might be similar to where you're at, here on the prairie. We'll get to minus 45 Fahrenheit, I make sure that I get outside and I get in touch with our mother every day. And I make sure that I, show love to my children and my husband and my family every day. I make sure that I water my plants, not every day because I don't want to kill them. But, I talk to them. It's just those little things, right? It's not some big thing, but I am a really happy person. Like, I can honestly say that in spite of things that are scary and depressing and, all of that stuff, I am a happy person. And I think it's because I have relationships with, everything around me and the land around me. And I make sure that when I put things into my body, they are things that are going to feed that happiness. And, I think if there is one big thing, although I think it's just one little piece of the puzzle, I'm nice.
Yeah.
and my husband says that I am too nice. But I don't think that that's, true or possible. I don't allow people to take advantage of me or to abuse me, but I'm nice. I love talking to people. I meet amazing people all of the time. And, people that at first look, it might look like, as a woman of color, I always kind of get a little twinge of like fear that, like, what if they're racist or something? But, I set that all aside and I'm nice to people, even if they're not nice back to me. And I think that makes a huge difference in the way that, I'm treated by the world. And it allows me to just go forward with a good attitude. And so, I think a lot of people say that when you're out there, let's say that you're like in a survival situation, a big part of it is a good attitude. I have that. I have a really good attitude, and I'm a happy person, and I'm nice to people. I think, yeah.
I'm just so glad you just said all that. I just really, I'm lucky to be married to the nicest person I've ever met, and I haven't always been the nicest person, or inconsistently nice, and she's really worked with me on that. And I just think that is, like being nice, being friendly, being kind, being loving, and staying happy is like the antidote to darkness. Because it's like, you start to go and get into aggression and anger, and now you're just contributing to the problem with everybody else. I do want to say, when this is like one of those taboo things, but I just want to say it. It's like, when I first saw your name, Linda Black Elk, I was nervous. It's funny because you said like you get worried about encountering racism. I get worried about encountering like activist scoldings. So, because like sometimes because of my interests, I get worried people are going to tell me that I'm co-opting other cultures, or that I'm culturally appropriating, or that I don't have a right to know about this. And I started watching your videos. It's like, oh, she's nice. This person's really nice. Like, yay, because because I've had some pretty rough experiences that sort of tainted, like make me nervous. Like I sometimes come into experiences a little nervous about where someone's going to be coming from due to, cultural legacy stuff. And I just was like, oh my gosh, she's so friendly and nice. This is going to be great. I can't wait to talk to her. So,
my students say that often too, like that and they're, Indigenous kids. And they say like people were mean when I asked about this. And it made them turn away from experiences because they were worried about people being mean to them. And I would never want them to go through that. So be nice.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So you're amazing. I could talk to you all day. This has been a really good time. Thank you for
Thanks. Yeah, I've had fun too.
Just looking forward to getting to know you better. I think I'll be coming out to visit Travis again at some point. So maybe we can meet up in person. That'd be really cool.
Absolutely. Let's go on a plant walk.
I would love that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. Help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 of the WildFed TV show, you can go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 10 episodes. Season 2 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2022. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.